Come on, Magnus. Please go knight h8.
Just for the culture.
For the memes, you know? And he does!
Hey.
And knight g5. Hikaru's not stopping there.
Yeah, knight g5 is the natural follow-up. And I think we might get to a situation where the bishop drops back to f8, guards g7. You kind of admit that you can't keep guarding f7. But no, d4. He wants to clarify the center and maybe pick up that b pawn.
What's mesmerizing about this game is how both players are using the board as their canvas. They're like two artists painting on the left side and in the middle, and Hikaru's striking everywhere. But Magnus, look at the defensive construction that he has adopted on the king side. It would survive a nuclear apocalypse.
And truly, let's not forget, the bishop is also defending the b pawn. So if pieces start to trade, it's actually going to be Magnus, of all people, who walks away saying, I actually might play for a win.
I'm not a big soccer fan, but when people describe watching Lionel Messi, I've heard it described as you think that you have more than 11 men on your field. When you watch Magnus and Hikaru handling their pieces, you almost feel like they have more pieces on the board to start with. They've like found a cheat code. Watch out, though, if you're Carlsen. Bishop back to f8. I think a repetition of moves is likely. Hikaru, he has enough compensation for the pawn in the form of his incredible piece activity. He goes for it, though. Hikaru playing for a win here. But I don't really see a future in this position. And he does.
Yeah, exactly. He does, and that's all that matters. You know?
Exactly.
I think long-term, the most that he could hope for with everything so defended on the king side is, yeah, he can win the b-pawn, but it will trade a pair of minor pieces. And, you know, the knight on h8, as silly as it looks, is actually an amazing defender.
Come on. What knight on h8? And now it's Magnus who goes for it. He says, you let my knight back in the game, I'm going to make you pay for it. But now there's 8th rank pressure, and I think we're going to get liquidation and finally a draw now guaranteed.
Yeah, a draw guaranteed, but you know, the most moral of victories for Magnus having the knight against the bishop. It's like, haha.
And that was a real test for Magnus because he was under pressure from the early middle game. Hikaru did some great stuff on the queen side, and every time that Magnus had to find an important move to stay afloat, he did. He found d5, he found knight h8, he arranged his pieces perfectly, and Magnus is just indicating that he is in phenomenal form yet again.
He is. I mean, Hikaru Nakamura is step for step with him, but just to be able to do that on defense is very, very impressive.
Magnus letting his clock run down there to like 1 second, but now he builds it back up, and is he like playing for a win here? Does Hikaru need to be a little bit careful?
King h1. Knights are tricky pieces. And with the king cut off here, this is not nothing.
I've played Magnus in enough bullet games to know that he can win with no pieces on his clock. And Hikaru, he seems annoyed. I don't know what he's annoyed about. This is still a draw.
Me? I'm wondering as well whether it's like he's annoyed with himself for having to be the one defending or...
Whoa.
Huh?
Whoa. What is going on here?
Whoa. We're seeing some kind of pre-moves, and maybe that was the reaction. He pre-moved bishop f2 or something?
But, wait, Magnus is black here. He gave up a bishop. Wait, what on earth? Hikaru could have captured that immediately and won the game.
I think he must have pre-moved it, which is why he's like just thinking to himself, I can't believe I just played so quickly.
We're going to have to do an instant replay after this game finishes. Unbelievable.
Just nothing to say after that.
I thought that it was a glitch, Amon. I thought that the board lagged or something, but no, it didn't. Magnus had made a false pre-move, and Hikaru had responded with a pre-move instead of capturing that free knight.
That was so strange, but here we are in this position. He's trying to play bishop f8. Let's be clear, even after that, well, let's call it a blunder, is what it was initially, it would have been immediately lost for Magnus. But when he did win the piece, it was at the cost of both of his pawns. So, yeah, I think this is actually going to be a draw anyway.
And there's just no way to make progress. That's the whole point. If both pawns disappeared, this game would last for another couple of hours. But as it stands, that king on g6 is in a perfect defensive position. Magnus did a great job of adjusting. You know, he blundered that piece, but he didn't panic. He found the only narrow path to a draw. And again, I will point out for the 100,000 of you in the chat who are sitting there saying, I didn't see what happened. Like, what on earth just happened? Why is Hikaru up a minor piece? We will quickly revisit that moment and try to explain retroactively what happened.
Yeah, right now it's all about this rook and bishop.
Whoa. Magnus is playing so sloppy here. Rook b7, he's blundered the g-pawn.
Yeah,
But
he got his idea.
And he had rook a8 there, I think, but he's just doing everything possible to give Hikaru winning chances.
Yeah, that's true. Rook a8 is a good spot, but hang on. That pawn will I think you could probably find a way in 50 moves to win that pawn. What do you think, Daniel?
I think you could surround it eventually. There are a bunch of fortresses with rook pawn and king against rook bishop and king, and this might be one of them. This might be a situation where as long as you keep the rook on a6, Hikaru actually has no way to surround the f6 pawn. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it almost feels like one of those potential worst case scenarios for Hikaru where he's played so well, and what is he going to come out of this with just another draw? Like, he's itching to get that one full point converted because he's had so many opportunities, just not quite enough in terms of an evaluation.
Man, but this would be so huge. If something crazy happens and Magnus blunders the pawn and loses the subsequent endgame, that would be so...
That would be remarkable.
That would decisively change the momentum and the tenor of this match. So Magnus has to keep his annoyance in check. Hikaru just continues to, make those motions. I mean, I would be happy that I even have the extra bishop to begin with. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, the players are reacting to something, so it's like, I can't wait to see what it is.
What it is, yeah.
I'm wondering if there was yet another blunder. Because they have too much time to be flagging.
Yeah, I mean, if white blunders the rook, he actually loses because black has the f-pawn.
Maybe the bishop got blundered, and then now it's Magnus pushing with one pawn.
Oh, whoa! What?
What just happened? We need so many instant replays right now.
Well, clearly
we just got teleported into the future.
We were lagging on like 20 moves, and those 20 moves were made, and Magnus lost the game. Before the next game starts, we have to look over what happened.
Played a game against Magnus, and he won rook and bishop against rook and two pawns. It feels like, he's got that extra piece. Yeah, he always had winning chances. No, that is so dead drawn. It's actually incredible that he was able to win that. And not in my wildest dreams would I think Magnus, of all people, could lose that position. You need a momentum boost as Hikaru Nakamura. You just got it.
I would not to be the Debbie Downer of the party as we see the next game underway, and I just think we see it in Magnus's body language. He might still be incredulous. He might just think, I'm going to wake up from this any moment now. But the reality is he's still up a point in the match. We're still in our first segment. So the objective effect of this game on the course of the match is probably not as big as I think some people might make it out to be, especially because I think Hikaru has misplayed the subsequent game, and I think Magnus is even angrier now. He's got an even bigger chip on his shoulder. Yeah, I think he's gotten what he wanted.
Totally. If anyone is, wondering, yes, we did miss the opening, but hey, newsflash, it was the same opening as every other game. So that's a consolation prize here as we are now up to speed.
And I wanted to add one last thing as we see queen d2 by Carlsen connecting his rooks, setting up the potential threat of bishop takes h6. He's got more space, better pieces. Hikaru's position riddled with pawn weaknesses, and bishop takes h6 right now has to be seriously considered. Last thing I'm on, when the eval bar was showing TB, when they transitioned to rook and bishop, no, it did not self-diagnose tuberculosis. Instead, it refers to table base, and table base refers to all of the positions with 7 pieces or under having been studied. So chess is actually a partially solved game, and the evaluation table base was a draw. That's what it means when the eval bar switches to TB.
That's a good explanation and much needed because it's like, hey, hang on, where's my evaluation?
Where's my eval?
Especially when it switches from TB to checkmate in 2 at the very end.
Okay, the elephant in the room. Literally the elephant. Because
look, he's going to play it. He had time to think about it, Daniel. That's the thing. He had 4 minutes, and guess what? He's pissed off from that last game, so of course he's going to do it.
And the other bishop, and when I say elephant in Russian and in some other languages, bishop is elephant, so that was the pawn. Look at the exquisite play, again, using both sides of the board. Bishop b3. Does he have a threat him on? What's that arrow? Blundering the queen
pin pieces, I heard they defend, but they actually don't, not here. Queen takes g6 after bishop b3 is the now elephant in the room, and knight h8, I know he might be trying to steal an idea, but does not work as well here. Knight f5 threatens checkmate on g7, and queen f8, you've got the f6 knight to pick up.
And the problem is Hikaru tries to stir up some complication. I think that was the only move, the only feasible move, is that Black's minor pieces are dangling, and without pawns to protect them, Black essentially can't multitask. Black can't simultaneously keep his king protected and keep both of his knights under control. That's why I would play knight takes e5 right now, and only after the knight leaves g6 would I jump with the other knight to f5. That's essentially a double attack, right? It's a double attack on the queen, on g7, but also on f6. And when the queen drops back to f8, you can simply start picking up Black's minor pieces, none of which are protected by a pawn. None of the 4 are protected by a pawn.
Yeah, and that's a really high-level calculation there. Knight takes, and then an intermezzo knight f5. But you stumble upon these ideas when you realize knight f5, as tempting as it is, queen f8 meets it so well. So you want to move that knight from g6 or force it to move. The move pawn takes on e5, Dania, is pretty much achieving the exact same thing.
Black has to get the queens off the board. Even if it comes at the cost of a minor piece, you might want to just go queen f8 and bite the bullet. White's got this sick response, queen h6 to c1, actually. Hitting the bishop on c6, I will confess, I didn't find that move on my own. But if Hikaru saves this one with a minute now on his clock, I would be even more shocked than I was given the proceedings of the last game. And I think after knight f5, we might see resignation very shortly.
Yeah, knight f5, queen f8, talking about forced moves. Queen takes on f6, and maybe he's trying to get something going with, like, knight takes f3, doubling the pawns, rook e6, rook g6, swinging over in that direction. So I feel like that might be what Hikaru's thinking about. He knows, as well as Magnus, that there's no way this works out for him, but you still have to find something.
King h1, just let go of that bishop, get away from it, because the bishop is radioactive, right? Knight g4 check is going to pick up White's queen and lead to a complete liquidation. I love it when you leave a piece on pre like this and play king h1. That produces such a nice aesthetic effect, at least for me.
Totally. And this is a reminder, like bishop f2, I'll admit, I didn't even think of it because
neither did I.
The moves were so overwhelming for White that, to be honest, it maybe wasn't necessary, but that's a fault of mine. I didn't even see this counter shot. Hikaru is truly so resourceful, but Magnus just does not need to bite on this bait bishop takes f2 here.
And he can play king takes f2, and when the smoke clears, he will be up a pass pawn on d4. In fact, he'll be up 2 pawns, but we know how good Hikaru is at manufacturing chances in lost endgames. It's the quintessential unstoppable force meets immovable object. Both of these players are such wizards in the endgame that I wouldn't flirt with even an iota of possibility that Hikaru builds up some sort of fortress. Magnus calculating it, if he plays king h1, he virtually ends the game on the spot.
Yeah, but you got to have the confidence to do that, because in some ways, king takes f2 is kind of a stable edge. You have the couple extra pawns later, whereas this, there's knight takes f3, there's bishop takes e1, rook e6 to g6. You have to be sure that you're not actually throwing the game away by miscalculating here. So a riskier approach, but the correct one.
And here's what Magnus had to see. Rook g6 would have run into knight e7 check with a fork. That was critical. And Hikaru blocks with the knight. He tries to keep some intrigue on the board, but I would just go rook f1 here. I would just move the rook away. Everything is hanging, and Hikaru is going to start dropping minor pieces here.